Welcome to the Golden Shadow. My name is Arran Rogerson.
And I'm Alyssa Polizzi.
Today we're exploring the concept of memes and their relation with the digital shadow. And this is because in our Shadow Play speaker series, we're having Chris Gabriel, also known as Meme Analysis on YouTube, as a guest speaker at the STOA as a continuation of our series. Last week we had James Hollis, which was really awesome. This is definitely going to have a different tone to it with meme analysis, but we figured as a kind of preparation, or maybe as a kind of taste of what might happen on Wednesday when this conversation happens with meme analysis, we're going to try and explore the concept of memes and the digital shadow ourselves. So the common usage of memes is as part of internet culture, right? So probably everyone listening is familiar with the idea of the meme. I'm sure they've seen many memes. This is a podcast that's on the internet, obviously, so you definitely know what memes are. But the concept goes deeper than just the replicated pic that has strange white all capital letters at the bottom that has like a cat and it says like, oops, I did it again, or something like that, or some strange overlapping of weird cultural images or symbols and concepts. It's hard to explain what an internet meme is, but we're going for something deeper than that, which is more the sort of Richard Dawkins notion of meme as a unit of culture, as a way in which culture almost acts as a virus. And that sounds really pejorative, but it's probably the best way to explain it. Culture can spread, culture can be passed along, culture can be imitated, replicated. And so the concept of the meme is much, much further reaching than the thing that we're used to on the internet. And it kind of penetrates every aspect of our lives, essentially.
I think we can both recognize that the internet meme is maybe a surface level interpretation of what memes are, but also a good entrance point, possibly, because it's much more a familiar concept to the everyday individual. So like some typical examples of internet memes, well, most recently would be like Bernie in his mittens and his jacket at the presidential inauguration. And it just caught on like wildfire, you know?
Yeah.
And everyone's photoshopping Bernie in every imaginable photo that has meant something to anybody. Like, here's Bernie with the New York Dolls, or here he is sitting next to Abraham Lincoln. It was just like this, something about it just caught the imagination of not even just one particular subset of culture in America, but everywhere. And it spread, as you said, like a virus. People were caught by it. And from like one brain to the next, people were feeding into it and giving life to the meme.
Right. Another example is the distracted boyfriend meme, which has been around for a pretty long time, I think, where there is a boy walking with his girlfriend, but he has his head turned and he's staring at a very hot girl passing by, and his girlfriend is upset with him. And this is sort of a different spin on the meme from the Bernie phenomenon, where you can kind of place certain phenomenon or names or groups on each of the figures in the photo. There's 3 figures in the photo, and you could place something on the boy that would say like video game. You could say gamers, and then like the hot girl walking by could be a certain video game that just came out, and the upset girlfriend could be like an older video game where it's like, why are you cheating on me, kind of thing. And that's like a strange juxtaposition of different cultural concepts playing with each other in visual form.
The meme is kind of acting as this odd symbol that has infected the cultural milieu, you might say, And especially with the internet memes, carries this sense of kind of trolliness or kind of low quality or something that feels really quite silly and
Yeah.
allows people to explore sort of different concepts, but through this often very like pop culture dynamic.
Hmm.
So I think because of that, they can feel really annoying. Like I think personally, just like, memes.
Yeah, I don't find them to be very appealing personally. Also, I find them to be a little bit obnoxious, but
Right.
that's partly the point, I guess.
With the internet meme, it's interesting because I was like surfing a like Jungian forum, and
Hmm.
someone was like, "I'm trying to make Jung's concepts more accessible, so here's a meme." And it's like, oh God, like okay, let's see what you got. And it was just sort of like this like scrapbook style photo with like a picture of alchemy and
Hmm.
a picture of someone looking at like the cognitive functions. It was like, all these things that are supposed to symbolize different elements of Jung's work. But
Yeah.
to the point, it does in some ways provide an insight into a concept rather quickly. It captures something in the imagery, sometimes with very little text, and it does translate something to maybe a greater group of individuals through this sort of symbolic representation of the meme.
Yeah, it's incredibly reductive,
Yes,
but
yeah.
that's how you make something accessible is you kind of reduce down its complexity to something that can be bite-sized.
Yeah.
That's kind of what memes are doing, and that can be for better or for worse. Other examples, really, really quickly, of memes, and we're not meme experts if that's not already obvious. But
Definitely not.
the Boromir meme,
One does not simply dot dot dot.
yeah, taken from Lord of the Rings, where he says one does not simply walk into Mordor, and maybe he's saying something like, I can't even think of anything good, obviously, but like one does not simply walk into McDonald's. I guess it could be like that makes no sense. But you replace the blank with something, and it has some sort of like energy to it
Yeah.
that is also conveying a kind of absurdity and
Yeah.
humor.
Right. Or like this impossible task. And rather than kind of going into the depths of it, it's like, let me serve this to you on this really ridiculous platter
Yeah.
of Boromir with his hand up in that,
Hmm.
way. And it's like, one does not simply just like pass the bar or whatever, but, it's making
Sure.
light of a situation, but communicating this kind of greater message of difficulty and challenge. Yet, once again, that kind of pop culture is riding with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sean Bean again as Ned Stark. Meme saying winter is coming, saying something like, my new hat is coming in the mail or something like that. Or Oktoberfest is coming.
Yeah.
You could replace anything
Yeah.
with it.
The phrase itself, or even just winter is coming as kind of being like the impending, not doom necessarily, but certainly like change, possible cataclysm. Some,
Yeah, but like not even like I'm serious. Like I've seen people saying
not,
like my like new thing is coming in the mail. Like
okay.
using it where it's like it's definitely not a cataclysm. It's just like anything that is coming.
Anything that is coming.
And the point is not to like communicate some deep, complex idea, but to
Right.
communicate something that's just kind of stupid, basically. And the stupidity is partly why it's appealing. Grumpy cat. It's like a photo of a cat, and it looks really grumpy.
It looks real
Kind of
sad.
self-explanatory. You can insert all kinds of sayings below the cat about being grumpy. Last one before we move on. Sad Keanu is one we found to be pretty amusing. Where Keanu Reeves, there's just a photo of him sitting on a bench eating a sandwich, and he looks really sad. And you can play with that all you want, and who knows what kind of innovations you can come up with sad Keanu. But the point is that there's something happening here that is very surface level. As like this is funny, it's kind of stupid or obnoxious. We like things that are sort of stupid and funny and obnoxious, especially as sort of a response to how serious the world can seem
Sure.
at times and how clean and sleek and put together a lot of media is. memes kind of play upon that, as in, this is not put together, this is not sleek, it's not appropriate. So it's a very kind of like anti-media type phenomenon. That's one aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, specific to the internet memes, right? But I think when you kind of drop a little bit more deeply into Richard Dawkins' theory, we're exploring those kind of shifts in tides and movements of culture that might not necessarily carry that same tone that internet does. And I think this is where probably the confusion or the disconnect is. Because I personally didn't even know the actual heart of the theory, or that we're exploring other elements of culture that exist under this umbrella of memes. It's just the internet and the popularity of that becoming viral has overtaken what the original theory was. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the original one.
Right. So moving forward in this conversation, I'm going to refer to internet memes as sort of the silly, absurd photos that you find on the internet. And that's going to be different from memes, which is the more meta, more generalized Dawkinsian, Richard Dawkins theory of memes. And it's not even a theory that he really pushed that hard. It's kind of like an idea that he brought up in his book, The Selfish Gene, and people kind of ran with it a little bit.
Okay.
But it's a very broad usage. And that's what makes this concept kind of tough, is it's really referring to something that is incredibly generalized and incredibly present in our lives, so much that we don't actually even really recognize what it is. And it's talking about culture. Memes is a way of thinking about culture. And memes is a play on genes. So genes are genetic, biological. We inherit genes. Genes tend to mutate over time. That's how organisms evolve. You have genes that mutate, and the organism becomes something. It evolves into something. It possesses new traits, manifests new morphology over time. Memes is a play on genes to mean a cultural unit that can mutate over time, that can spread, that can be passed along the same way that genes can through reproduction. And that still doesn't really help explain it if you're not familiar with this concept. But a meme is really any unit of culture, meaning anything that can be transferred between people in terms of language or ideas or concepts or symbols or ways of doing things, styles, rituals. So, for example, a joke is a meme in the sense that if I say to Alyssa, "Why did the chicken cross the road?" she hears the joke, and now she has the joke. I just gave it to her, and she might go and tell the joke to 10 people, and they might tell the joke to 10 people, and they might tell the joke to 10 people, and suddenly you have thousands and thousands of people that know this joke. And why did the chicken cross the road is a good example of a meme that has spread. And it's kind of counterintuitive because it's not a good joke. That's partly why it's spread. It's because it's sort of funny and stupid, which is why it kind of like can be compared to the internet memes pretty well. But more examples of cultural units could be words. Let's say I make up a word, and the word is like DARF, and DARF means like it's like the F word, but like funnier. So I say DARF you, and then you say like, well, DARF you, and then like all of a sudden like everyone we know starts saying DARF, and it spreads. But DARF isn't actually very funny, and it doesn't actually convey much meaning. It just sounds kind of stupid, and because of that, it won't actually spread. So there's this kind of notion of survival of the fittest with these cultural units, where I might make up a meme or create some kind of meme, but it's not very fit. People don't like it. It's not compelling. It doesn't grab you for whatever reason. And so it dies out.
So DARF might have been funny to you and I initially, and maybe I said it to a few others. But 6 months later, no one even remembers that joke.
Right.
No one recalls that we were, making a big deal of it at the time because it didn't have this set of fitness. It didn't work fully to really kind of merge with the hosts, like the individuals, it didn't spread. There wasn't a like cultural transmission, you might say. And that word dying out makes room for like other kind of elements of culture to come forward, because maybe
Right.
there's another word. And I think we kind of see this happen over time. It's like, what is all the new words all the hip young kids are saying?
Right.
It's like things just seem to sort of emerge
Right.
and kind of take hold of people and get spread into the kind of general lexicon and then into culture. And then suddenly it's like, you know, being added into the like Merriam-Webster's dictionary or something like that. And it's like suddenly there's this new addition to culture.
Right.
And why?
Right.
Because it worked, I guess.
Right. So woke is a word that has caught on
Yeah,
in
fairly
the
new.
last
Yeah.
5 years,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit before that. I'm not really sure. But that's a good example of a term that was used and it caught on for whatever reason.
Right.
And again, it's not necessarily catching on because it's good or it's healthy or it makes the most sense.
Yeah.
It's more unconscious than that. There's something deeper going on where the word woke, let's say, seems to fit. And it might fit for all kinds of reasons that we don't understand. But it fits, it's compelling, it succeeds in some sort of functionality as a word. And so people use it, and then more people use it, and then it spreads. And before you know it, it's been coined.
Right.
It's sort of been established as part of the culture. And that's a meme.
Yeah.
Woke is a meme.
Yeah.
But again, any kind of saying, that's the way things go. It's a saying, right?
Yeah.
Someone said that at some point, and it caught on, and people started saying, well, that's just the way things go. And that spreads because it works. It accomplishes something that we need. You let the genie out of the bottle. Like that's a saying that expresses this concept of like, you've done something that you can't undo. The internet is something that cannot really be undone. You've let the genie out of the bottle, and now the internet technology will always exist. So letting the genie out of the bottle is an example of a saying that caught on. It was fit. It was adopted into the culture. So this idea of Darwinian evolution occurring within culture is abstract. It's confusing, but it happens the same way that it happens in biology.
Yeah.
Things emerge, they evolve, and they get passed along, they spread, and they have a kind of fitness. And so culture is constantly evolving, constantly being refined in some sense by the sort of currents of nature, and it sort of sculpts things into existence over time. And so memes represent that Darwinian evolution. Those units of culture that manifest, they mutate, and they develop, and they might gain momentum and become something big, something huge that started off small.
It's interesting to consider these sort of like short-term bursts of memes coming to life and then sort of slowly closing out, like these sort of shorter lifespans versus memes that might really anchor into the culture and hold true for decades, if not centuries. Because, you know, I was thinking about other ways that memes are expressed, not just, you know, jokes or symbols, but, you know, like fashion or dances. Like, I feel like there's always like some new dance that like little kids are doing.
Yeah.
Like, what's the one with the arms? What is that, flossing or whatever? It's been around for like a few years. You know, the one where like your arms are
It's like a
straight.
Fortnite
That
thing.
kid, I see. Yeah, we're so bad at internet.
No, internet culture is not something that we find very compelling.
But like, you know, like my little niece was doing, I'm just like, what is
Yeah.
this dance? And then there's all these videos of people doing it. And like, you know, several years go by and kids are still doing it. But I don't think it was as popular as when it first came out. And probably in 10 years, no one's going to be flossing, right? Like, but there was this time, this sort of lifespan of it taking hold of like the collective consciousness, and it represented something at that time. But maybe its fitness was not strong enough to truly take a hold and, you know, continue on.
Right. More examples. The Christian cross, very prominent symbol in Western culture and has been for a very long time. it's complicated, right? It's not as simple as just saying, well, it was such a good symbol that it caught on. It's like, well, there's that, but it's also, it was pushed
Yeah.
in some sense. It's like, this is the symbol we're adopting.
Sure.
This is our badge. This is sort of like the Christian badge. But you can understand the cross as something that anytime anyone sees it anywhere, they understand it to represent Christianity, right? It's really, really stuck in the culture in a serious way.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that people like it. It doesn't mean that people even use it, but it's very recognizable, and it's just two lines, right? You can draw it anywhere on the wall. You can spray paint it, and people recognize, like, oh, that's the cross.
Yeah.
And you could understand that if they tried to, let's say, if the loose notion of Christians, if they tried to push a symbol other than the cross, like, I don't know, like 6 intertwined circles, let's say, that could still be cool, but like it's not quite as simple. It's not quite as iconic. It's not as easy to draw.
Yeah.
There's all kind of reasons why it wouldn't be as good of a symbol. And so when we think about like logos, if companies have logos, there's a fitness to those logos.
That's true.
Some logos are good, some are not so good.
Yeah.
The Nike symbol, I think, is like a really good logo. It's a really good symbol. It's incredibly simple, but it's very striking. It's got motion and action to it.
Yeah.
And it works. I like the Nike symbol. I might buy shoes that are Nike just because of it, as opposed to, I don't know, New Balance has an N. It's like, it's okay. It's like, that's not as fit of a symbol to me. Or like kangaroos. That's like a shoe, and there's like, maybe there's not a kangaroo on it, but I'm imagining there's a kangaroo on it, and it's like, it's not quite as sexy as like the Nike swoosh. So those are all memes as well.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting bringing up the cross, you know, at the time of sort of uprising of really any religion, there might be sort of several symbolic images that are floating around, and likely a couple of them, or even just one or two, are really going to kind of float to the top and become that centering and that anchoring point. But you start talking about symbols, and I'm really going to kind of explore more of that interesting archetypal underpinning within the symbol, because to me, like, symbols are gateways and entrance points into the archetypal structure. And there's something about a symbol that allows it to be both that access point into the archetype, but also can kind of carry different dimensions of meaning to different people, similar to the meme, right? It's like Boromir can be something that has a central tone or a central theme, yet it can merge and kind of take that like mercurial nature to kind of adapt into different places for different people. And that's sort of happening on these really grand scales where we have, say, like religious symbols where they do represent some aspect of culture, and that is carrying it through, but it also is connecting us to that deeper archetypal core, which carries an incredible depth of meaning, versus Boromir, which is kind of, you know, more shallow.
Yeah. So archetypes, we can kind of review for a moment how we might think of archetypes. And it's tough. There's something that they're deeper than what we would say is sort of like waking immediate reality. Yeah. Like, we only see sort of the plays upon archetypes. We only see sort of like the manifestation of their energy in some sense. Things tend to circumambulate archetypes or kind of rotate around them without ever actually arriving at whatever the archetype is. But they kind of represent a kind of human nature, a nature to our psychology. Yes. Something that everything, all of reality is grounded in, kind of a framework, a sort of skeleton. Yeah. And that skeleton, that sort of hidden undercurrent of reality, is filled with our various manifestations in psychology and culture, in our stories, even our physical surroundings, the objects that we create. They're all sort of playing on something that is deep within us, that drives our desires, it drives our sense of meaning and perception, and drives our actions. Yeah. So a compelling symbol like the Nike swoosh, for instance, is playing on some sort of archetypal nature. And it's weird to think about because it's like it's just this symbol.
Right.
It's just like this. You can draw it on a piece of paper. How does that play upon an archetype? It's like, well, you have to think about archetypes in this really meta sense.
Yeah.
There's something about the curvature of it. There's something about the feeling of movement within it. It communicates action. It communicates a sort of power and sleekness, and that has something to do with its shape. It has something to do with its pointiness and curvature, its thickness. You could understand if the Nike swoosh was like thinner, if it was more kind of like a crescent and less like a blade, it might not be as compelling.
Yeah.
So it's playing on something deep within our psychology that's
Right.
like, I like the Nike swoosh.
From my understanding, the Nike swoosh is related to the Greek goddess of victory, Nike, and then the actual like imagery of the symbol itself is meant to be kind of like the wing.
Okay.
So it's symbolizing speed and movement and power and all this dynamism and victory and all of the energy that's built with it. And of course, when we think about the gods themselves, especially ones of the plethora of pantheon gods like the Greeks, you see how they each represent these sort of archetypal expressions because the god itself is a symbol or a personification of the archetype. And from that has been pulled like the wing, and that's been placed onto the shoe. So we have like this line of connection that the meme in a way is allowing us to connect to, because when we see Nike shoes, we connect that to a sense of like athletic prowess and mastery.
Yeah.
Like all of the top athletes wear Nike. It's a great performance shoe. There's a sense of what you can trust when you have something like that, like a good sword, you're outfitted right. And there's a feeling of energy that's being carried through that might take you back to that archetypal expression of victory and power and battle.
Yeah, so to kind of gravitate this a little bit closer to how we normally think of archetypes, you could say that characters are a kind of meme, stories are a kind of meme, scenes from stories are a kind of meme, and you can see that sort of again played with internet memes. Boromir saying one does not simply walk into Mordor. That meme only works if you've seen Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
If you have no idea who this character is, it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So it's playing on Boromir and his sort of archetypal structure, which is someone who is a warrior but is weak-minded, is corruptible, is sort of incredulous. He doesn't believe, he doesn't have faith that this is possible. So the meme of one does not simply walk into Mordor is playing on this kind of corruptible, weak, masculine heart in some way. And you can see how that is relating back to how we normally think of archetypes, how we normally think of the symbols that appear on a tarot card, or the idea of the various characters that come in and out of the hero's journey, the kind of scenes that play upon light and dark and chaos and order and death and rebirth, that we're used to normally thinking about when we think about archetypes.
Yeah, so it's perpetuating the archetypal structure more than anything. And the more that we've talked about memes and I've tried to wrap my head around it, it's the best way I can relate to it is that it seems to be in service to, it's not a good word, but I don't know how else to say it, but like in service to, nested under the archetypal structures, which is getting us into the nature of the psyche, the way that we order life, the way that we make sense of things, the blueprint that gives us the kind of exoskeleton of moving through life.
Right.
And Boromir is just like Nike, a symbol, a kind of personification of something deeper, or even Bernie. It's like it only works because we have this general association to who Bernie is already. He's this wise Senex figure who's very caring. He wants to kind of like revolutionize and bring, development and equality to all. And here he is in his coat that he's owned for 20 years and these hand knitted mittens. It's evoking so much that grandfatherly senex archetype that we feel this immediate like connection to it. And then we're like placing him in all of these different scenes and it's really silly. But ultimately, like we see Bernie and it conveys something incredibly deep. And who Bernie is in our culture has continued to develop since the moment he came on the scene.
Yeah.
There was like the time when like a bird like flew on his shoulders, like, oh my God, like Bernie's like this prophet, even the birds love him. So he's had a really interesting dynamic, I think, with culture and has become like a culture icon and is translating and really kind of perpetuating his own cultural dynamics by just being who he is, not intentionally.
Right. So this is going to get kind of weird, but like Bernie himself, not just him wearing mittens on Inauguration Day, but Bernie himself is a meme.
Yeah.
Right? Because like I don't actually have Bernie here. He's not in the room. I can't like reach him and be like, oh, Bernie, I can touch him. Like there's Bernie. But I still have an image of Bernie in my mind. He is a character in my mind. He isn't that much different than Boromir. He's real, you could say, but to me, he's not really that different. He still represents the Senex. He's sort of the grandfather. He's the wise man. He's very wacky looking. So he has kind of like this sort of hysterical kind of genius to him in some sense. Like the way he talks.
Mad
like
scientist.
Billions, billionaires, like whatever he says. That is entertaining to us. It gives him character. It gives him personality. And so you can play with Bernie as a character. Like there's one image that I found really funny where he's like charging up like Dragon Ball Z style.
In the mittens, you mean?
No, this is definitely pre-mittens. This is years ago. But he's like charging up like Goku. Like, and I think it's like, it says like Dragon Bernie or something like that, like Dragon Ball Z. And then he says like, this isn't even my final reform, which is a play on like, this isn't even my final form. Because Dragon Ball Z, they keep evolving to like more and more powerful forms. It's like, it's not my final reform. So he's like this cartoon character in a lot of ways. And that makes him like perfect meme, internet meme potential. Yeah. Right? He's likable. Yeah. He's very prominent in our culture. He represents all this archetypal significance, like we said, of the Senex, of the wise person, of the hero. He's trying to create positive change. He's trying to fight chaos.
He's a reformer.
Right. He doesn't quite have like a like a flaming sword, but he is sort of like trying to conquer chaos, conquer evil, slay the dragon of society's shadow, whatever. And so he's very fertile ground for playing with that archetypal energy. So you can slap mittens on him and put him kind of in like this almost like grumpy looking position on Inauguration Day. And it's like kind of like overlapping almost with the character of I'm spacing Curb Your Enthusiasm. Oh God. Drawing a blank. But anyways,
it'll come to me.
He plays Bernie on Saturday Night Live, but like
Larry David.
Yeah, Larry David. Larry David is like just like a huge grump. But there's something very playful and fun. And so the internet meme can kind of play with this archetypal energy, and it works because it feels so real and deep to us. And Bernie's not just anyone. He's not just an old man. He's something far deeper than that. And that's why the meme works. It's why sad Keanu works. It's because it's not just because like any old person looking sad on a bench is funny. It's like, no, Keanu Reeves looking sad on a bench is funny because we know Keanu Reeves, because he has this archetypal significance. He is like sort of this heroic character that was in the Matrix. And so the internet memes all play with this. Not all of them, but many of them do play with this in this way that's very interesting.
It's interesting also because, I don't know, just to kind of circle back to Bernie, there's kind of this feeling of him being the underdog that I think is extremely powerful and maybe something that's particularly potent in the cultural consciousness right now. You might even say the cultural unconscious. And as Bernie emerged, in like 2015, There was
he's
this.
been around for way, way longer than
Well, I
that.
know he's been around, but
Yeah.
he really became bigger
Okay.
when he ran for at least the Democratic ticket.
Yeah.
And there was a feeling that who Bernie is, despite being eccentric and wanting
Mm-hmm.
to be a reformer, is also an underdog, someone who's kind of out of the establishment.
Yeah.
And a lot of energy and like cultural sort of pull came from him having that kind of archetypal dynamic of the underdog, the kind of like David versus Goliath, because he was trying to go against something so much larger than himself. And he's continued to do that every time he's run. It's like
Right.
Bernie's probably not going to win, but every time he takes a swing, he accomplishes something. You know, they
Yeah.
say like Bernie being a part of the political conversation has moved the Democrats left, as an example. That's something people say. But you might at least speculate that there was this desiring or this kind of energy building in the collective unconscious, that there was like a desiring to want to have something emerge that allowed people to feel like there was a sense of potential or power to make some change. And as Bernie emerged as this figure,
Yeah.
it was it all like it merged on him, and maybe it could have been someone else, but he kind of brings that feeling that things are possible against odds that are so great. And the kind of change that would bring development and prosperity for many could happen. And that was something that was maybe desiring and being needed. And Bernie became the icon of that.
Right. So David and Goliath as a story is playing on some kind of archetypal energy, and that's why we find it compelling, and that's why it's stuck. Right? A story that has made it thousands of years and is still being utilized as some sort of concept. You can tell that's a fit story.
Right.
It doesn't disappear. It keeps working and working and working. You can keep telling that story over and over again. And so it's grounded in some sort of archetypal structure. And that's like, I would say, sort of like the hero's journey in some sense. Goliath represents like something that cannot be surmounted. David has the courage to try anyways.
Sure.
And against impossible odds, he succeeds. And that's like very much like a hero's story. But David versus Goliath is a meme. We say it when we say like the small business is going up against the corporation. It's like David versus Goliath. Or, you know, some kind of low-level boxer somehow makes it through the Olympics and fights like the defending gold medalist. And it's like David versus Goliath. Like,
Right.
and Bernie is playing upon that same meme of David versus Goliath.
Yeah.
And we find the story compelling. But you can see how all these memes are interacting in this like impossibly complex way, because Bernie is not just David and Goliath. That's not the only meme that he embodies. He embodies all these different cultural trajectories and different cultural realms. So the whole idea of the meme is tough because we're talking about a unit of culture, but we're really talking about units of culture that are nested within other units of culture, which are nested within other units of culture. And there's meta memes, and there's like more low level, how would you say, more reduced memes that are nested within the meta memes. And that you begin to understand like there's this whole landscape within culture, like this very vast landscape of all these interacting pieces that are kind of ebbing and flowing and becoming and evolving towards something all the time. And it's really hard to understand. It's really hard to isolate one meme from all other memes and say, well, I can hold it in my hand and that's clearly what it is.
Well, the archetypal structures are in that same way acting through this sort of like fractaling pattern. And it can be helpful to step out and look at it in like a more singular framework. But the reality is things get like abstract very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize how interconnected things are, but to also like not get lost in that dynamic and focus maybe on one certain point of Bernie. And then suddenly you make the other connection and then the other connection. But really these memes are converging. And within that are those other kind of nested archetypal dynamics. But, you know, the memes are the vehicle through which the archetypal sort of readiness and rightness is being delivered.
Right.
And so the archetypal structure is in a way like giving purpose, and its a high survival rate might be connected to how in alignment that is with like the heart of the archetypal structure. So how much sort of like aligned valence does Bernie have to the Senex? It's like pretty high, right? Like
Yeah.
he's in the green zone, and in the David and Goliath kind of archetypal structure also like there. So it's like pinging, like boop boop boop. It's like it works. It's lighting up. Everyone's being activated by it. All these different ideas and emotions and feelings about it are being constellated, and it spreads
Yeah.
because it works.
Right. So names are memes, kinds of dances are memes, rituals have some sort of meme component to them. These are all things that can be passed along. You can teach someone these things and they'll adopt them and they'll take them and pass them along to more people. There's ways of moving or walking or talking. There's a kind of accent that you might find compelling that you start adopting and say, I'm going to talk with this like this New York accent for some reason because you like it. Or maybe it was handed down to you by your parents or the people around you at school. Impressions can be memes. People will do like the Bernie impression I did, like billionaires. Like,
Yeah.
I can do that impression, and someone else finds it funny, and they'll start doing the same impression, and then you might have this impression that's being done over and over and over again. Or I can say like a Jack Nicholson impression or something like that, and that can be something that's repeated, replicated over and over, and it can mutate over time. And you can maybe start doing like a Jack Nicholson, Bernie Sanders impression, like it's mutated in some way. That can happen. And the internet. What is weird about the internet is it can take all these things that are kind of more in physical reality, like jokes and dances and rituals and hairstyles and names, and it converts them into this digital snapshot. And so Bernie is a physical, real person, but he becomes this snapshot on the internet. He's captured in this image with the mittens, and the internet allows it to be translated into other people's minds across the world. Yeah. Right? And that's what's so strange about the internet. And that's like the emergence of the internet meme, is that all these things that are playing on these archetypal patterns to begin with, these things we find compelling, these things that we want to replicate, that we want to copy, they're spreading incredibly powerfully, incredibly quickly. Yeah. And then that's what we see on the internet. That is kind of what the internet is in this weird way. We don't really understand it that way. But it is sort of this spreading of information that almost works like a virus.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I feel like it's possible with how accessible the internet is, how much everyone's on there.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And do we see these like life cycles of kind of potent but short-lived memes take hold because they can be accessed by so many so quickly, and then they kind of like run through the system and then they just like die out. It's like I don't know how quickly those things would have cycled through the culture and kind of been deemed unfit at any other point in time. So we're seeing like this acceleration and dynamic growth of culture in all of these ways, both in like what's really taking hold and seems to be sticking, but also what, has like a shorter lifespan. Yeah. Because the internet has made everybody so interconnected that, I can find something online 1 minute and across the world, someone else is finding it. And it's like, how would that have spread before? Well, it probably wouldn't have, right? Things wouldn't have moved outside of communities or countries at the very least. And now we are infecting each other with cultural memes across time and space.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can think of like a traditional song might have been something that evolved very long time ago in the past, like maybe even like tens of thousands of years ago. You have a song that a tribe would sing, and it's like their song. And tens of thousands of years, and this song can get maintained. And now on the internet, you might have a new song that you're listening to. Like, oh, here's like the new top 10 song or top 40 song. Like that might happen every week. Right. Yeah. And so that's what, what's so strange is that a lot of these cultural units, these cultural items that are being created very rapidly, but they're also being discarded incredibly rapidly. Yeah. And that really, I mean, you could tie that into all kinds of different patterns in our society, but it's almost like just cheap cultural items that aren't really worth very much, like easy come, easy go. The
Right.
same way you might like buy something off of Amazon. And
Yeah.
you're like, well, it was only $5. Like, here's this pop song. It was just like $5. I listened to it, done with it, throw it out. It's sort of like a trivialization of these cultural units.
It's an interesting point, because for something to have really taken hold in times past, there had to have been like a real cultivation of that in some capacity. The sharing of it, the passing on from one group of people to the next or within a community, it would have been slower.
Yeah.
And it would have worked its way through the general population, so that by the time it really took hold, it disappearing by next year would just not make sense. Yet now we have these. It's not that they're shallow and that they don't carry those same meanings or archetypal structures or symbolizing this depth. Like, it still does. You can pull apart the silliest meme and still find something.
Yeah.
Yet the chances of that really having a longevity to it is likely pretty low. So what's going to win out in this kind of like cultural mimetic experience that we're all going through in the information age?
Right.
It's hard to know.
Yeah. So to end this, we'll talk briefly about the shadow aspect of this. So something we've already brought up is that like a lot of memes are really silly or absurd or kind of inappropriate or trollish.
Yeah.
And as I said, they're kind of like an antithesis to the kind of sleek, more refined, more put together persona of society that is put forward in mainstream media a lot of the time, right? So you can almost think of the kind of internet memes that we see, but I mean, not just even internet memes, but all kinds of behavior on the internet as manifesting this sort of unacknowledged energy of society, or this banished energy.
Yeah.
People who are going around trolling on the internet and like writing terrible things in the comments section. It's not something they can really do in person. Like, good luck walking around just insulting everyone.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you're going to get away with that. But on the internet, you can do that because the drive is there. And so the shadow through these internet memes is sort of expressing itself
Yeah. Yeah.
in ways that it never could before because of the internet.
Yeah. It's been given an very interesting platform where it can be expressed both through internet behaviors, things, as you're saying, that would never be replicated in regular life. And at the same time, also through some of these more like symbolic or imagistic memes, there's a potential for shadow content to be brought out into collective awareness and to be recognized or at least acknowledged in some way, that it starts to possibly become a bigger part of the conversation. And that's what's interesting as well, is that I think it's both serving a purpose of kind of shedding a light on unconscious material, and that can be extremely powerful and can help like the general cultural individuation process.
Yeah.
But it can also perpetuate this really dark and, unhealthy maladaptive tendencies that people have, because they can get away with it and it catches on. And
Right.
there's no consequences of that behavior.
Yeah.
Even if we look at memes as carrying this kind of similar dynamic of the virus, it taking hold of people and spreading dark rumors, bad behavior, has that same type of energy of something positive that seems to uplift the culture. So we're dealing with positive shifts in culture, but also like pretty wild negative shifts as well.
Right. So there is some shadow integration happening as a result of the internet, right? It's like you need to confront the shadow in order to integrate it. You need to kind of engage with these sort of banished contents and experience all that sort of nastiness, that sort of mess, that even the pain and suffering that it might entail in order to integrate the shadow contents. And the internet is shining a light on those things.
Yeah.
Like, you can look at the internet and be like, whoa, this is disgusting. Like, so much of this is really, really gross. But that's the shadow, right? You can look at the shadow and say, whoa, that's disgusting. I don't want to touch that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, it's you. It's part of you. And so if we're thinking of the shadow in a collective sense and of society's shadow, the internet is revealing society's shadow in all these ways. And you can think of it in all kinds of ways. I mean, you can think of it as just sort of like as the trolling, the sort of what I would say is kind of like shadow masculine energy that's on the internet of people being like really mean and bullying each other and just saying terrible things. That's being revealed. You have to actually look at that and confront it and say, what is going on here? Rather than just sort of like sweep it under the rug and be like, oh, well, those aren't real people, or those aren't people that we need to even care about or think about. It's like, no, there's like some serious suffering, some serious pain here. And also just the ability of people who normally have not had a voice, not been able to like have the mic and speak and say, I exist. That's also what the internet is doing. And that's an important part of like collective shadow integration, right? You could say like marginalized communities have not been able to have a voice in the past. The internet, because it kind of levels the playing field, everyone can kind of speak out, especially on a platform like Twitter. There is sort of a leveling that happens where the unacknowledged side of society, or the shadow of society, is something that you actually have to kind of confront now. So there's that shadow integration happening, but at the same time, this kind of gets into like the weird metaphysics of the shadow. But shadow contents can produce shadow contents.
Yeah.
They can be self-perpetuating. Your shadow contents can produce shadow contents in other people, right? Your trauma can traumatize other people. Your nastiness inside of you can make other people nasty. Your bad habits can recruit other people to join in on those bad habits. So if you think of someone who's an alcoholic, somehow convincing one of their friends to drink more often, you can see that the internet has the same effect. So a lot of this nastiness that's popping up on the internet, it is breeding nastiness. If you insult someone, they might be more likely to insult you back and then insult others. And so this insulting like energy can spread. And that's another aspect of the shadow of the internet. It's like the shadow contents are being revealed, and that's good. And we can integrate that shadow, hopefully, because we are aware of it. We're shining light on it. At the same time, the shadow contents of the internet is producing shadow contents in other people.
I think it requires a lot of discernment,
right,
for individuals stepping into this realm and to recognize like these greater sort of waves and tides of like memes that we're just being assaulted with at all times, and having to find kind of that own like inner barometer of truth and discernment that allows you to move through it, push certain things aside. It's like, what are you putting your energy into? Isn't that kind of part of like what makes memes work, right? You give energy to it, you think the thought, you say the words, you sing the song, you dance the dance, whatever. Like, that's the big question to me of like, how do you bring that more mindfulness to this process? How do you be the change you want to see in the world? It's like, where are you putting that energy? What memes are you pushing forward into the world? And what are you engaging with online, especially because that digital shadow is heavy and powerful, and there's a lot of it coming from all these different directions. But as an individual, you have the ability to discern where it is you want to put that focus, what you want to propel more deeply into the cultural future.
Yeah, the strange landscape of information and the way that we are just being pummeled by low quality information. Some of it's high quality information, definitely, but a lot of it's like really low quality information that is being sort of streamed into our brains. And unfortunately, it just requires everyone to be more discerning, more wise than they've like really ever needed to be, as far as like what you pay attention to, what you ingest, what you engage with. Which is partly why I think that philosophy and hopefully what we're trying to do in some sense is actually not becoming, it's been important obviously, but like it is something that I think is really important right now.
Right.
Is like, how do I find wisdom in this crazy, crazy world that is incredibly confusing in a way that's never been before?
Yeah.
And hopefully we are integrating that shadow energy collectively in some way. At least that's the goal.
Yeah. It's the process of collective individuation, and maybe the intensity of everything that we're experiencing in this more modern age is forcing us into this this kind of cauldron of intense bubbling, where there's a lot of potential for development and transformation and big steps for cultural individuation that comes through recognizing all of the different archetypal energies at play, what's pulling at you, what is really in line with the kind of greater journey of development, and focusing on that and allowing that to be the guiding light through this process.
On Wednesday, February 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we will have, Chris Gabriel, also known as Meme Analysis on YouTube. He's going to come have a discussion about these very topics: memes, trolls, the dark web, and the digitalization of the shadow. That's going to be at the Stoa. If you want to join us, it's free. You can RSVP at thestoa.ca. If you find this podcast useful, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/goldenshadoworg.
Do you have a dream you'd like us to analyze? Head over to goldenshadow.org to submit your dream for possible interpretation on a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time.